It's time to get the inside info on BYU with Cougar insider Mitch Harper of KSLSports.com on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Welcome back, everybody. Yes, Mitch Harper. He is your BYU insider for KSLSports.com. And this portion of the show brought to you by Trajan Wealth, TRAJAN Wealth.com. That's Trajan Wealth for all your trusted local needs in retirement. Mitch Harper. Mitch, I think right off the bat, obviously the news that Nico Marchiol is going to be getting the medical red shirt, likely transferring out of West Virginia. That was the word. And so now you've got yourself another freshman quarterback going to get the start for the Mountaineers this week. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, excited to be on, guys. And, yeah, it's very interesting, the quarterback situation for West Virginia. It seems like it's trending towards Khalil Wilkins being that guy, it would seem. But, BYU has another test to probably face another running quarterback, which has, given them struggles at time last year and last season as well. So BYU's got to be on point and ready and maybe, bounce back a little bit from what was kind of a mediocre defensive performance early on in that Colorado game.
Yeah, we talked about this game earlier in the show, Mitch, and I told Alex, I think BYU needs to just take these guys to the woodshed. We haven't seen BYU yet take a team outside of that Portland State team really to the woodshed. I know they had convincing wins over Stanford and East Carolina early in the season, but there were points in all those games, as you remember, where there was a little bit of a struggle here or there, and obviously we know what happened in Boulder. I want to see BYU really dominate a team from start to finish. Is this an opportunity for them to do that, and do you agree with that?
Definitely, and I do agree because, Aaron Roderick was asked this week about slow starts for Bear and the offense, and he kind of scoffed at that. I disagree a bit because at the end of the day, they're not scoring points quick. They still found themselves down 14-0. They couldn't go blow for blow with Colorado initially in the game, and still only ended up at 24 points. I think this is definitely an opportunity. With how banged up West Virginia is offensively, BYU has the chance to hammer these guys, and that would be a nice luxury for BYU too if you could take care of business, put the hammer down, have an extra day off, and then get ready for another road game next week. Could be a nice little bit of breathing space for BYU in the middle of the season. So I think this opportunity definitely poses itself for a chance to BYU to blow out an opponent. And I want to see BYU come out strong. I thought the defensive line in particular was a little bit underwhelming initially against Colorado. I thought the interior of the defensive line and defensive ends as well. They need to play better and really set the tone. And offensively, BYU's got to come out and score points quick, not this kind of slow build throughout a game. So I think this is an opportunity to do that. And just don't give, Khalil Wilkins, if he is the guy for West Virginia at quarterback, any sort of optimism or momentum and belief, really lay them down early, because then I think BYU can cruise. This is an opportunity to do that, which is very hard in this league where every game feels like it's a toss-up.
What did we learn about the injury situation with BYU with the release of the weekly conference injury updates? And is there any other names on there that I think that we saw last week or didn't see this week or whatever it might be? What's the update with some of the injuries that we know about so far?
The most notable was Austin Leausa, interior offensive lineman. He was initially listed as questionable. Now he's on at probable, which would mean he's most likely going to play this week. He left the Colorado game early due to he was seen in a sling after the game in Folsom Field. And so, but he's listed at probable. Seeing Isaiah Glasker listed at probable was kind of noteworthy. Just, how severe was that being banged up for Glasker, who played the entire game, had the game-clinching interception. That was noteworthy. But Leausa and Tommy Parasis were probably the most notable. They're currently listed at probable. We'll get another update tonight at 8 p.m. and then the 90 minutes before kickoff update. But I think that, BYU, by all accounts, pretty available for this game compared to other teams. You look at their last week's opponent, Colorado, a long injury list or availability list for their game coming up against TCU. BYU in relatively good shape as you get kind of close to that midway point. So if you can escape this game relatively healthy, that you're at a good spot, because they had some scares last week with L.J. Martin. He briefly left the game for a moment, but then he returned, and Aaron Roderick said he is completely fine, good to go and healthy, and he's critical for this team. There was a moment when Carson Ryan looked a little bit shaken up, but he returned. So, BYU, they're in a good spot health-wise. They have navigated some difficult injuries with Sione Moa, who remains out, JoJo Phillips, who remains out. Those were pretty big in terms of depth, but seems like early on they're navigating it okay. But there are a few players that just carry a lot of weight for this team, with L.J. Martin, with Bear Bachmeier. There's key players where you've got to keep them healthy at all costs, and so far BYU's doing an okay job at that.
What's the next step for Bear Bachmeier? I mean, he's been pretty impressive through 4 weeks when you consider he's a true freshman, not turning the ball over. They are putting points on the board, probably not at the rate that everybody would love to see it, but he has been solid, and he's taking care of the football. What's the next step for him in his development as they go into week 5?
More shots downfield and having a higher success rate on those plays down the field. I think that's going to be kind of the next step for him. And it feels like still BYU's been a little bit vanilla with their play calling. Last week, it was kind of taking what Colorado was giving them. They're focusing all their efforts on L.J. Martin. Bear Bachmeier created opportunities for him to take off and run the football, and maybe gives teams now more to think about when, devising up schemes to stop BYU's offense. They got to think about, wow, this freshman quarterback with a weird number and a strange first name, he can also run it 20 times a bit. So they got more to think about there. But I want to see BYU take some more shots down the field. And I bring that up because it's what Aaron Roderick talks about. Whenever there's a quarterback competition in any given year that he's been leading these offenses, he talks about stretching the field as being kind of the traits of what his offenses are all about. And so far it's been, minimal success. There's been moments, but I want to see it more consistently, more of an effort down there too. And I think also finishing drives in the red zone with touchdowns. 7 times this year, they've had to settle for field goals inside the red zone. Will Ferrin is excellent. And even though he had a miss last week and ended his long streak of 25 consecutive made field goals, you still trust Will Ferrin completely, but finish the drives with touchdowns. I think that paired up with some more shots down the field, that's going to be important, because we did see last week where BYU doesn't have an advantage in terms of field position. Going into that Colorado game, they were, about averaging a starting field position around their own 34. In that game, they were starting around their own 21. And so when you had long distance fields to move, it was not as easy going offensively for BYU. So that's where having those deep plays, those chunk yardage plays, could be really beneficial for this team and help them offensively. So that's the next step I want to see for Bear.
If there is anything that West Virginia could do in terms of moving the football, obviously the question marks at the quarterback spot, but what dangers, I guess, is the best way I could put it, do they pose for this BYU defense?
Well, I think, they're a team that they know they're going to have to run. They got to run the football. And, I think that for, again, quarterback run game has been at times a tricky thing for BYU to stop. And we saw it last week where you knew Caden Salter was going to be able to run the football. And that Draylon Miller, too, going from wide receiver to running back. Coach Prime even talked about that in his weekly press conference. And you kind of knew it was coming, and they still had some early adjustments where guys like Jack Kelly were saying that kind of rattled us a little bit. We didn't see that coming. That was a little bit surprising, considering it was kind of laid out in front to everyone in the press conference. But so I just think that's still always an element that can be challenging. But I don't see West Virginia having the size and physicality to just simply run the football and wear down BYU. And that's where I kind of paused a little bit with them to be able just to do that. Whereas Colorado had real size in the trenches, and they could play that run game and try to wear an opponent out. You didn't see Colorado take many shots, whereas West Virginia, they don't have the size like even Colorado or BYU does. So I think it's going to be more challenging for West Virginia to just solely rely on the run game and try to eat up the clock and physically wear down BYU, because I don't think their personnel is in a place to make that happen. And with their top wide receivers being out for the season with an injury, that's been the case for a few weeks. And you still kind of got issues at quarterback where, Wilkins was a little bit of a spark, but I don't know if you're too afraid of him as a passer. I think this could be a pretty one-dimensional offense. And BYU, we've seen how that goes when they face teams that can become one-dimensional. BYU and Jay Hill seem to have a lot of success. And I just don't think West Virginia poses many threats because of how banged up they are and just the size of their personnel. I think BYU, if they're, not making mistakes, if they can, win that margin, BYU is going to be in a pretty good place in this matchup. And with the home crowd behind them too, I think this is going to be a pretty energized environment because it's been about a month since they last played at home. There's not many things I look at in this matchup with West Virginia's offense and BYU's defense where I see the Mountaineers having much of a edge on BYU right now.
No question about that. They're just too banged up. And as we talk about West Virginia's personnel and where they're at right now, and you look at what BYU presents, who's a player on offense and a player on defense you think is going to have a big game on Friday night because of who their opponent is and what they're facing?
Continue with L.J. Martin here and getting that ball going on the ground here, Mitch.
I think L.J. Martin's the guy that you point to get, back past that century mark of hitting that 100-yard mile marker. Because I think that, West Virginia's defense, I will say, they can accumulate tackles for loss and sacks. They have had success there. And when you look at their availability report, they're relatively available on the defensive side compared to the offense that's just been, in many respects, gutted. So West Virginia can get after you, but I do think L.J. Martin's due for a big game. And I'd say defensively, I've just been really impressed with Tanner Wall. When you kind of look at final snap counts for BYU in a given game, he's always near the top. And you've seen a lot of rotation in other spots in the defense. But guys like Jack Kelly, Isaiah Glasker, and then Tanner Wall is typically next in line on the snaps. And I just think that shows the trust, how much confidence this defense has in Tanner Wall. Because Jay Hill likes to work in Falatau Satuala as much as they can. They still got Raider Damuni too. But I look at Tanner Wall and L.J. Martin as guys that should have good games in this game. I think BYU gets a takeaway or two in this one against West Virginia. So those would be two guys that I think I look to for BYU to have some good games on Friday night.
Mitch Harper, he's our BYU insider for KSL Sports.com. Mitch, we're looking forward to this one. These late-night games, we'll be hanging out late into the night there in Provo. Can't wait, though. I always love these ones. I always like the Friday night games as well, so we're looking forward to it, and we'll chat with you again tomorrow night, man.
Yeah, likewise, Alex and JJ, appreciate it, and it should be a good one, and we'll have coverage on KSLSports.com.
There you go. Mitch Harper, everybody. Best in the market.